fingers crossed that everything is working. Oh my goodness. I hope that things are working okay. I am a little far from the mic, but today will be an interesting daytime stream. We are going to do both an unboxing and then we're going to dye some yarn to leave no dye behind because I have some leftover dyes. Hello, hello. Julia, can you hear me okay? Since you're the first one I see in the chat, I will ask you. Oh my goodness. Good morning, good morning. Yeah, and I think that it'll be a lot of fun. Now, my KnitPicks package limped to me. The packages don't always show up in the best condition, but overall, I have been a fairly loyal KnitPicks customer for over a decade. I am a KnitPicks affiliate, which means that I have an affiliate link, and so I earn commissions if you purchase yarn through my link. You can find the link in the video description and pinned in the chat. Obviously, you have no obligation to use it, but it is like a win-win if after the unboxing you want to go shop there yourself. Thank you, Julia. But the big interesting thing that's in the package this time is that KnitPicks offered something new. And I will talk about that in a moment because I'm going to let the stream get out there and give people a little bit time to join. But I wanted to give a heads up of what we're going to be doing today, and then I'll talk more about what's in the box. And I guess I can show you. This is what we will be using when we are dyeing yarn. I have some leftover dye powder, and maybe not very much dye powder at that, but we'll see if I need to go and get more leftovers from my stock set, then we'll do that as well. But I just wanted to use up these colors. And I have pre-soaked 3 different yarn bases in plain tap water, but I'll talk about that more when we're going to get into the dyeing portion. I figured we'll start with the unboxing and then move over into that, but I just wanted to give a heads up. So if you're watching the replay and you want to skip ahead to the dyeing, you can do that, but for people who are curious about the new KnitPicks minis, Bare Yarn minis, we'll start with that, so that way they can hear what I think. Yes, yay unboxing. Yay unboxing. All right. Oh, I should make sure I have water. I don't think the stream will be that long, but I will say that I have used the leftover dyes that I have for a few different videos that aren't necessarily leave no dye behind videos, because if it's just dry powder mixed with citric acid, like it's a leftover, but still I could have mixed it fresh and that's sort of the same. But I mean, I love neons, but I figured that it would be fun to just use up what's left. And so, Stacey, you were curious about those? Yes. Yes, I'm very curious too. So, let's jump on into it. As I said, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and we are going to be doing both an unboxing from KnitPicks and dyeing some yarn, leave no dye behind style, sort of very much dyeing by feel with some acid dye powder mixed with citric acid. So that is the plan for today. But let me show you what I will be unboxing. So recently, as in I discovered this I think last week, KnitPicks released some Bare Yarn mini skeins of 11 of their different Bare Yarn lines. These are all Bare Yarn lines that I have dyed, I think. Yes, these are all Bare Yarn lines that I have dyed in various videos over the year. But they now have them in a 10-gram sample size. Now, they're marketing these as samples versus mini skeins that you can buy in bulk. Do I have a bag? Let me. Okay, versus mini skeins you can buy in bulk. Because for one, they've listed them all at the same price. All of these mini skeins are $1.50 for 10 grams of yarn. And the base price of the yarn ranges from, I think, about $5 to $13 or $14 for some of the more expensive ones. So it's nice that, you know, they have it a little bit cheap to try out, but if you wanted, you know, 25 bare minis, it's not necessarily worth it. And if you need your 10 gram minis by the hundreds, like I tend to use, it's definitely not worth it. And especially since KnitPicks has a limit of, you can only order 99 of an item. And so I couldn't go then and order the like hundreds of minis that I need for, say, Hanukkah this way, because I'd have to make multiple orders, and also it's more expensive for most of the minis than wool to dye for. So for a couple of them, it could be worthwhile, but overall, can they be bought in bulk? No. I'm not sure if this is going to come, but if I search like the bulk bare yarn page for minis, there are no options for that. And if I go, let's say we go to the Swish DK mini, it says, they say these small undyed mini hanks allow you to try new fibers for a fraction of the price. So, and then they advertise the like full skein on that page. So I think that the market, they're marketing this to people who want to start dyeing, aren't sure what base they want to use, and it's an easy way to try out a lot of bases for cheap before deciding which to buy, which I think is good, but I was very disappointed because I thought, especially since during the pandemic, a big shortage that there has been mini skeins, because just in terms of what the mills can produce, and I think Wool to Dye For, they contract a small business in Peru to wind the mini skeins, which I think is but anyway, with the pandemic, it slowed all that down, and so minis and micro skeins are selling out really fast when they come back into stock. And so I was like, oh, there's a great potential here, but with no bulk option. Like a skein of Swish DK, I think, is $8.99 retail. Yeah, it's $8.99 retail. And so if you're going to get 10 of the 10 gram minis, that would be $15. That's a huge markup for making mini skeins. I think that of the ones listed, the Andean Treasure is the most expensive bare base, but even that, so that one would be worth it, I think. But yeah, the markup is a lot. So let's see. Oh, so Stacey, what's the difference between vinegar and citric acid? Vinegar, there's two main differences. One is the actual acid. Vinegar is acetic acid, and citric acid is citric acid. And they have different, the chemistry of them is slightly different. There's values called pKa that talk about, I'm not going to go into that, but basically with citric acid, you can make your solution more acidic a little easier than you can with vinegar, because when you have citric acid powder, that's just citric acid, whereas vinegar, I think, is only 5% acetic acid. It's already diluted. So there is that. But citric acid powder is great for diluting acid dyes if you want to speckle, and so that's one reason why I do that. So there is that. All right, let's do this unboxing. And okay. Ooh. But yeah, this pack package limp. And what does the tape say? Superior threads. Okay. So I did buy some other stuff. All right, so the minis are in here completely loose. They are labeled individually. So I'll go through all those in a moment. But I did also get some more of the cotton boucle. Oh, come on. Okay, I ordered more of the cotton boucle, which is something that I love. And I ordered some stroll. Oh my, this is really blown out. Okay, I ordered some more Bear stroll, and I was concerned because after my mount stroll option, they said that they weren't going to be sending full, like, any bags anymore. Because I don't know if you remember, I ordered 40, or I ordered 2 bulk 20 packs, and they came completely loose in the box, which was really frustrating. And so I have 1 full bag and 1 partial bag. So that's 4, 8. Okay, so I have a partial bag with 2 extra. At least it's in the bag. I think my preference, and it's a little disappointing to me if they're doing it this way, my preference when I order full bags and they aren't running low would be to get 2 full bags, not 2 partial ones. I'm checking to see if stroll is out of stock. No, stroll's currently in stock. So I'm not sure why they would send me an open bag. So that's just disappointing to me. But we've got all of these minis. So yeah, I'm glad that they're still bags. I mean, I couldn't see a mill shipping them like 1,000 skeins of stroll in just like a bin, not packaged in any way that could be easily counted. And so I understand if they're not going to put all the yarn inside a bag, inside a box, but I was like, are you really just going to empty bags of yarn? Yeah, that just didn't make sense to me when I called customer service, who said they were going to check with the warehouse and never got back to me. Now, I found KnitPicks customer service to be overall really helpful. And so they offered to replace or refund for any damaged yarn, but they don't always have information. So they're coming in mystery bags. Stacy, what's a mystery bag? Every mystery bag. Do they still have those? Oh, wow. Okay, yes, they do. They've been sending Bear stroll. Oh, interesting. Interesting. Okay, oh no, wrong camera. All right, let's see. I've got 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I've got our 11 minis here. And actually, I'm going to switch to the other camera. Or actually, I'll do it this way. I can't see the chat when I'm over here, but I think, I'll tilt this so I can come back, but I think you should be able to see the yarn a little better. Okay, so these 10-gram minis do come labeled. Oh my gosh, this is hard because I can't see. I was like, I need to be able to see what the camera sees. Okay. So these are 10-gram minis, and they do come labeled. So this says Swish DK weight. It's Bear
It gives the yardage per 10 grams. It would be nice, since these are supposed to be samples, it would have been nice if on these cute little tags, if they like put some information about the full skein, but you can extrapolate. I'm curious. Okay, the tag is on one of the ties, which is good. So this really is handy as a little sample. It would be expensive labor-wise and annoying to have to label. It would be expensive and annoying to have to label like huge packs of this. So I think it's a little dirty from the box. I think that for right now, if this is the way that they have them set up, I don't expect that they will be having these in any kind of bulk form. But as I mentioned, it is a handy way to see what you like, to compare the Swish DK to the worsted, which honestly, okay, there is a difference. I was like, they look super similar right now. But then you can see easily the difference between Hawthorne and Stroll, for example. And on a small scale, that could be really nice. So I'm excited to have this as a resource and maybe something that I'll keep on hand for live streams when people ask questions about different yarn bases. So I find that handy. But as I mentioned, they are fairly expensive, especially when compared to the bare yarn price. The exceptions to that are Gloss and Andean Treasure. So Andean Treasure, oh, it's so soft. This is 100% baby alpaca, and Gloss is 70% merino, 30% silk. So these are the two most expensive bases of all these out here. And I could see myself buying at the $1.50 per 10 grams, buying maybe a few of these two bases to do some kind of fade set, conceivably. But I don't think the intent of these, especially since they aren't offering any packs of them, I don't think the intent is to buy them for people to create advent calendars and things like that. I think that the intent behind all of these minis is for is exactly sort of what they say, for people to sample and feel the differences between them. Now, oh, I'm glad Twill is in here. I love this one, the like super bouncy twist. So I think that that is really nice. I don't understand why they only did these 11. Maybe it's a test. These might be some of their most popular bare yarn bases. I mean, a lot of these are ones that I purchase. Like Pellet, I don't dye it as much anymore, but this was the first 100% wool yarn I ever dyed. And it's actually one of my favorite yarns for color work. But I don't dye it as often because it doesn't look very pretty. The thing that makes it good for color work is that it has a lot of grip to it, which means that it isn't as pretty once you dye it up unless you reskein it. It's not like a felting thing as much as just it sort of sticks to itself. So that's why I don't use it as much in videos anymore. Well, also it used to be really one of the cheapest options. So that's why I used to use it a lot. But I still love that. It's one of my favorite yarns for doing like mittens and gloves and color work. And then I use Stroll all the time, Swish all the time, Hawthorne all the time. I mean, I use a lot of these all the time. I don't use the Woodland Tweed as often, but I've dyed it a couple of times. So I'm not going through all the fiber contents. If people have some questions about some of them, then I can. So yeah, I think that this is a really handy resource for me, so that way I can show like side by side different bases really easily.
And I'm going to come back and sit down and see if you guys have any questions about any of the bases. And then I can tell you more about specific ones. Yeah. So if you have questions about specific of the bases, I'm happy to go through that and to talk about that. But again, I do want to show, I did not spell that right. Huh. So the Bare Andean Treasure is $14 for 100 grams. So if you were to buy 10 of the 10 gram minis, that would only be $15. A dollar markup per 100 grams is, I think, fairly standard. It's maybe still a tiny bit high, but it's still like in a realm of reasonable markups. Certainly, it would cost me more than $1 worth of time to make that equivalent 10 minis. Even with my automatic skein winder. Oh my gosh. This is my packing slip. So when I say that the package limped here, that is pretty bad. But just for comparison's sake, Wool to Die For's minis come in a bag like this. This is a pack of 25 10 gram minis. So that's just like a difference in how, like, if they were going to offer it in bulk, I would expect it in something like this. So let's see. Yes, you have questions. Wool of the Andes and Stroll. So, okay, let me go back.
I'm actually planning on dyeing Wool of the Andes today. So for Wool of the Andes, here are two Wool of the Andes worsted, and then Stroll is here. And I can't see.
Gotta tilt the computer. Oops, should tilt the chair. But it's on so I can see.
Okay, here we go. So we've got Wool of the Andes Superwash, and then Wool of the Andes, and then Stroll. So Stroll is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. Wool of the Andes is 100% Peruvian Highland wool, and then the superwash is superwash. So I've used both of these in many videos to do some superwash versus non-superwash comparisons. I've also used Stroll and Wool of the Andes, the non-superwash one, a lot. I would say that Wool of the Andes is the cheapest bare yarn that KnitPicks offers. I'm not sure if the superwash Wool of the Andes is the next cheapest. I don't know exactly, but it's a big reason why I would use Wool of the Andes for a lot of experiments back in the day. Also, as far as a non-superwash yarn goes, it holds up really well with dyeing and washing, and it can be used for felting, but it still looks very, very pretty after you have dyed it. What was I going to say? Yeah, and I use Wool of the Andes for like a lot of workhorse projects. I would say that it's like a reasonable dupe for like Cascade 2020. It's also 220 grams 220 yards per 100 grams. And yeah, I use it for like a lot of kid hats, things that get high wear. I don't know if I'd want it as necessarily as, it could be fine as a sweater. It isn't the softest, but I still use it as cowls and scarves and hats. So, yeah. Is gloss the one with silk? Yes. Gloss is our silk. Where are you? Here we are. Gloss is silk. It is 30% silk, 70% merino wool. And so that's the gloss right there. And are the skein lengths the same between the mini and the full skein? No. Doubtful. Okay, so here is a skein of twill that is folded in half, and this is twisted. Let's untwist it. So, yeah, the skein length is smaller with these minis, which, I mean, the skein length on all these minis isn't even necessarily the same as each other. I mean, clearly you could see that the woodland tweed is a lot shorter. It is very possible. It is very possible that they are winding these in-house as samples. So it's very possible that their intent is not for people to buy it in bulk. And if I went to try to, or if I were to go and try to order 99 of one of them, that then they'd be out of stock, that they wouldn't have that many to fulfill. So it's possible that it's something that someone could be winding, maybe not by hand, but with a skein winder or something on site as needed. Or, yeah, it's, so again, I don't know, but that's a hypothesis. Because otherwise, why, if they were making these in bulk, oops, not what I wanted. If they were making these in bulk, I don't know why they wouldn't list bulk packs. Offer them as individual minis, but then also list something like this where you can buy them in bulk. Because I think to have a mill make a bunch of minis for you, it is fairly expensive. I think, or it's not that it's fairly expensive, but they have large minimums. And so the talking with some to like have like minis made of like of a certain color, you probably need like lots and lots. And so it's probably easier for like, yeah, so it's so I've heard that there's really, really high minimums to get minis made, which means that, yeah, and so I have to imagine that they're not sitting on tens of thousands of these minis and expecting to sell them one at a time. So my thought is that either this is just like a little test or I have no idea. I wish that they would have, I think the real thing that indicates that this is a sample versus an intent to buy in bulk is that they have the exact same price for all of the minis. They're all $1.50. And so I think sort of priced based on the most expensive yarn that they have this way. And so I think that that is the reason. The reason is for someone who wants to start out dyeing yarn and isn't sure what base they want to buy a lot of. It's a way for them, for one of you to potentially try it out and see which base you like before committing and buying a 20 pack. Versus buying a 20 pack and then deciding you don't like it and then feeling disappointed. So, yeah, I think I've never purchased minis from anywhere where they've had the mini at the same length as the full skein. I will say that like the knit size of KnitPicks full skeins does vary based on the mill. So like Felici is a lot shorter than Stroll because one is done in Peru and one is done in Italy. And I think Muse, which was milled in Japan, is also a different length. So I think that has to do probably with the mill and their machinery. But yeah, so I think overall, my official recommendation is that if you want to dye a bunch of minis, like I will probably still buy mini skeins from Wool to Dye For.
But if, mainly because it saves me a lot of time from making my own. Making your own is always the cheapest. But if you've been curious about another base from KnitPicks, I think this is a great way to sample it and to feel it, and even do a mini test dye to see how it takes up color. So conceivably, I could do something and dye all these in one pot or something like that. I think overall, my plan with these minis is to keep them on hand for when I stream. So if someone asks, I can hold up two to compare them, because it's like an easy thing to keep on hand. But I think that's just me personally. You just got a bunch of minis to experiment with new bases. You love the ones you got? Oh, awesome. Yeah, and I mean, if it's worth it to you to not have to wind them yourself, because, so I invested in an automated skein winder, which was like $800. So it was an expensive piece of equipment versus like having to manually wind them. So if you, like, the upcharge can be worth it if you don't want to manually wind it yourself, both in terms of time or in terms of just repetitive motion type concerns. So therefore, yeah, those are, I guess, other considerations which could make it worth it. It was just, I think in the ChemKnits Lab Facebook group, I did a calculation, and I forget, I don't have it handy. I think that so this is Platinum DK, which is the same price as Platinum Sock from Wool to Dye For, which is very similar to Stroll. And I think that each 10-gram micro skein is about 75 cents. I forget if that's with the wholesale discount or without. So versus the ones at KnitPicks that are $1.50. So that's a big price difference. Now the wholesale price of Platinum Sock from Wool to Dye For is cheaper than the wholesale price, than the bulk discount from KnitPicks Stroll. And the bases are fairly equivalent, even in terms of yardage, but there are pluses. I have a whole 75-25 comparison video. There are pluses and minuses to ordering from the three main companies I order bare yarn from: KnitPicks, Dyer Supplier, and Wool to Dye For. And of those three, I don't have an affiliate relationship with Wool to Dye For. But I would say that overall, if you're ordering in large quantities, Wool to Dye For is probably the cheapest. But if you want to order in smaller quantities, Dyer Supplier and KnitPicks can be more affordable. And all three companies have different bases. So that's why I order from all three. Side note, you bought some reusable zip ties using my link. And so yay, I'm so glad that's helpful. Yes, so my video descriptions are always filled with great links to the things that I use, including my reusable nylon zip ties. I usually link to the bare yarn I'm using, and more. I am an Amazon affiliate as well, so yeah, if you like want the stuff that, yeah, so I do earn commissions if you buy anything really through my links. So there's that. But now let's leave no dye behind, and let's dye some yarn and have some fun. It'll take me a little bit to get set up, but oh, I forgot I could have come back to this screen. Oh well. Okay, I never set up my counter, so let's get a laptop so I can see. What's the best time for a We Crochet KnitPicks sale? November. The biggest discount they ever give is usually Cyber Monday or Black Friday. Actually, no, I corrected. Black Friday is usually the biggest discount you can ever get from KnitPicks or We Crochet, which they're basically the same company, but I think that they're going through what I think Knit Crate also went through, in that naming things knit.
sort of excludes crocheters or makes crocheters think it's not a place for them. And so I think that a lot of companies are trying to be more inclusive for crocheters. Okay, so the 3 yarn bases I have pre-soaked are Wool of the Andes Worsted, Swish DK, and Big O. So Wool of the Andes Worsted, I mentioned earlier, is 100% Peruvian Highland wool. Swish DK is 100% superwash merino. And then Big O is, I think, 50% superwash merino, 50% nylon. And all 3 of these bases will absorb color differently. And as I also mentioned, our leftover dye is, I've got not very much. I've got some fluorescent dyes mixed with citric acid powder that I stored from another day of dyeing. And I believe that these 3 colors I have left are fairly predictable Rebecca colors, but fluorescent fuchsia, purple pop, and frozen, which isn't actually fluorescent, but I have been playing with rainbows lately, and so these are the ones that I have left. But now I need to actually set up. So actually, I am going to put in a brief commercial break. Hang tight as I set up. I haven't protected my countertop yet. Okay, let's see. I don't need you. I protect my work surface with a IKEA shower curtain. They tend to last a while before I have to replace them. Because eventually they do get like torn from like cleaning and everything over and over, but they last pretty well. Okay. And save this in a moment. I may end up, as I said, grabbing other dyes. It depends. Once I start opening up the powders, I will be putting on a respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves. I should have all of these linked down below as well. Hello. Okay, but Maggie was asking. Oh, I'll start. Let's start the dye bath, and then I'll chat more about sales. Okay, but first, I've got some white vinegar. We do have citric out. Oh, that's a lot of vinegar. Maybe I don't want to add that much. Maybe I'll add 2. And that's like 3 to 4 tablespoons, maybe. It's leftover dye, so we're being very approximate here. I'm gonna get some water. Normally, I dye yarn on the weekends, but this past weekend, I had my second vaccine, and so I was pretty much out of commission. It's still not bad. Okay, so that's about 7 or 8 cups of water. And now I'm going to come over with the pre-soaked yarn. And so I think I'm not squeezing out very much liquid. So here's our Big O. Actually, I think I want the Wool of the Andes to be in the middle. It's our non-superwash yarn. The other two are probably going to steal a lot of dye from it. Okay. Now, there is acid in with the citric acid mixed dyes. So we do have citric acid powder in there, but I did want some acid here in the pan, so that would help colors strike. And I'm not necessarily going for speckles. Purple Pop and Fluorescent Fuchsia spread a lot already, so we will, even if I had the lowest immersion, we would probably end up seeing some color spread. Frozen strikes pretty quickly, so we'll see how much color we have, how pastel this ends up. I don't even know if I want to add the dyes and then sort of like mush it around to help spread. We're going to see what the colors do and see what, I guess, my mood is. But I do want to start heating this up. So I'm on my gas stove. I have a burner here and a burner down there. Oh, and all of the tools and equipment that I use are dedicated for dyeing yarn and are not used for food. Okay. And while we wait, and now the nice thing about this is I can see where the yarn gets bubbly. Hello, hello. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really, really happy and tired. That was like the main thing. I was tired and like my arm hurt for like 2 days. I had some other side effects, but it wasn't. I think I was expecting it to be worse than it was. So, but I had an excuse to not cook dinner. I was like, well, this is like the first weekend in a long time that I've like had an excuse to like do like nothing regards to my kids or work. So yeah, that was funny. So yes, Purple Pop is absolutely a color that breaks. Basically, of the 5 fluorescent colors, fluorescent dyes that you can buy from, say, Dharma, I think that there are really only 3, or maybe only 2 fluorescent pigments. I haven't actually looked at the dyes themselves to see. I haven't looked at the dye ingredients, but I have an hypothesis. Oh, Julia, thank you so much for the super chat. Thank you. Thank you so much. Do a little dance. But what so basically, fluorescent fuchsia is very fuchsia. Fluorescent lemon is very yellow. Fluorescent safety orange breaks, and I think might be a combination of the yellow and the pink. Radioactive breaks, I think might be the yellow with something that's blue that isn't fluorescent. And Purple Pop breaks, and I think it has some of that pink with, again, a bit of blue in it to make it a purple. So the one like primary that doesn't really have a fluorescent hue to it is the blue. So, oh, great question from Celtic Seahorse, or Celtic. Okay, I'm in New England, so it could be Celtic Seahorse, but in New England it's the Celtics. So that's why I'm wearing my Red Sox shirt. So that's why I was like Celtic, in case anyone's curious. How did I get into dyeing yarn? Well, when I started the ChemKnits as a blog wow, that's a whole other story. But I was making content for the blog, and it really encouraged me to try new things. And I really wanted to learn how to do cables. So I got a book for like, I don't remember how many different sampler panels it had in the book. There's a whole journey about it on the blog, but I got that, and it turns out cables were really easy.
But at one point, I was like making these 12-inch by 12-inch squares, and I was like, oh, instead of a 20 square blanket, I should do a 30 square blanket. So I bought enough yarn to make a 30 square blanket out of Lion Brand woolies in Fisherman White, because, you know, a sampler pastel yarn is great for showing off stitches. So I do that. And then it turns out cables were easier than I expected them to be. I tried cables for the first time. I'm like, oh. The one thing I didn't like about the book was that the instructions were written versus charted. And so there were some that were just took me a long time to get through before I discovered charts, which is a whole other journey. But I then was like, I finally finished it. And I was like, I did 20. And I'm like, I am not going to do 30 squares. That's not going to happen. But then I had like 10 balls of bare white yarn. And I was like, I don't want to make white things for everyone. There has to be a way for me to turn this a different color. So I did some looking, and that yarn was only 20% wool. I found that you could dye yarn with Kool-Aid. So I was like 2 blocks from the supermarket. I ran to the supermarket, saw what colors of Kool-Aid they had, bought some, and then the rest is history. So that's how all that happened. Oh, you're spinning right now? Oh, awesome! Ooh, I'm excited to see the fiber you dyed for the April dye-along. Feel free to just call you Seahorse. All right, Seahorse. Sorry for the digression there. But yeah, that's how I started dyeing yarn. And then, goodness, I guess like, and then for making videos, I think I had made a couple of videos, and then All for Knitting wanted me to make some videos that they could license, and this was like in the earlier days of YouTube, before things changed. I only really stopped working with them when they wanted exclusive rights to videos. Originally my contract was that I put it on my channel and they would put it on theirs, so the videos were in 2 places, and so therefore if you see some of my videos on All Free Knitting's channel, that's kind of why. And so I was getting paid. That was one of the first ways I was getting paid. And so then I was like, ooh, what other videos can I make? So I did a few yarn dyeing videos, and people commented with questions, and so I started just filming more of my dyeing experiments versus just taking still pictures, because I wanted to play around with different techniques, and people liked it. And so that's sort of how I ended up there. But oh goody, we're getting warm. I see some movement. Oh, I mentioned my affiliate links with the zip ties. I think Amazon may have done it again. Occasionally, it's probably not Amazon. It's probably whoever has the listing. Occasionally they change what is in the listing, and so like there's no longer removable nylon zip ties. So double check that it says removable or releasable or something when you check out, because they have done this at least 3 times to me. And so, yeah, but the ones that I use are 12 inches long, white. They may not look white anymore because the nylon absorbs acid dye and food coloring, so then they get really dark eventually. After like a certain number of uses, they might get brittle and snap, but I do reuse them a lot. If you have yarn that is dyed already but don't like the color, can you re-dye it? Add speckles, anything? Yes. I have a few videos on the channel. If you search the channel for over dyeing, I have a few videos like that, and I was actually going through some of my knit crate yarn and pulling some to over dye, not because I don't like the color, but because the bases are interesting and they're pastel enough that I could. Basically, if it is a pastel color, do I have? Okay. If you have a pastel or a medium color, you can over dye it. If it is something that is really saturated, like if it is as dark as like my shirt, that can be a lot harder to over dye, especially if you're using food coloring. Excuse me, one moment. Everything's fine. It's spam. I just couldn't see who it was calling, and so I figured I always, when the kids are at school, I have to accept calls from local members in case it's like a teacher or something calling. So, you overdyed a knit crepe gray sparkle with purples, and it was so good. Oh, awesome. I'm braver than you at doing dyeing videos. It's a lot of fun. I think that one of the things that I really enjoy about making dyeing videos is that I'm trying things out and I'm trying to learn and explore different techniques, and so then it's sort of the like, you get to join me on the discovery, which is really, really fun to film. So if it's a protein-based yarn with like wool or something like that, then yes, you can dye it with acid dyes or food coloring. You can over dye cotton yarn. I have one video for sure where I've over dyed cotton, and actually a few where I've done like blue cotton and speckled on it and things like that, but you just have to use a different type of dye. But yeah, I think this particular spam call was one saying that, hi, this is law enforcement and there are like illegal activities associated with your, I don't know, I hung up. But like, yeah, it's one of those spam calls. Thank you. You get the car warranty calls. I get like a lot of hotel, I get a lot of spam calls. Not fun. All right, I am going to go over to the stove and get suited up. Oh, I keep trying to turn the laptop instead of turning the whole chair. Okay. So I can't see the chat over here right now, so if something goes wrong, I might not know for a while. I think that the deluxe rubber respirator I use may be currently out of stock from Dharma, but I do have linked in the video description a blog post where I listed a lot of other masks that other indie dyers use and recommend. So they aren't necessarily the one that I've tried, but especially with mask shortages, I tried to put that together for people. And so I am going to be really muffled now because I've got my mask on, I've got my glasses. My grandfather, who passed away in June, unfortunately did fall for one of the spam calls. And the worst part for me was that it was someone who, I think they called him and said that, like, this is your oldest granddaughter. And so then he was like, oh, Rebecca. And they're like, yes. And so they pretended that, like, I was in trouble. I mean, they didn't know my name. I think they sort of fished for it. And then, you know, he wired them money because he thought that I was in trouble and couldn't tell my parents. And my parents happened to be traveling at the time, and he did know that, so yeah, that was really sad. But my uncle was able to stop him before sending the scammers more money. So that was unfortunate. Okay. So I have the most of the fluorescent fuchsia.
and then the least of the other two colors. So let's just start with this, and for now, I'm just speckling it on. I get a lot of questions about why I like to speckle by hand instead of other types of ways. And the real reason is that I like the control that I have from manually handling the yarn, or sorry, the dyes. I like being able to tactilely control how much I spread it out. And I think on camera, there's a little bit of blue contamination, probably because I don't have a yarn mop, so I'm just sort of quickly dipping my fingers in, like, I don't know, in a spot that wasn't super hot. But you could see how small the colors were, but then how quickly they've sort of spread. In part, it's because we have high water. In part, it is because these are fluorescent colors that strike really, really slow. Oh, man. Okay. Here, I think it's some purple pop. So I haven't entirely decided how, and I've really not used very much color on here at all. But just sort of tapping out my gloves here on the end. And I'm wiping my hand off on a paper towel. But I'm not sure how well you can see. I don't think on camera that the pink that spreads is very similar. What's different are the blue specks and the purple pop. Technically, there are differences between the way the pink spreads. It's not exactly identical, but it's really close. And so then in contrast, let's just bring in a little bit of frozen, which I think I have the least of left. But I just sort of, before going really far in with it, I just wanted to show a little bit of difference of these three colors on these different yarn bases. And I know with the blue, I tapped mostly on the wool of the Andes, but that's because that purple, I'm going to cover up the dyes again and sit for a little bit. That's because the purple had really, really spread out from that. So let me wash my gloves. And I'll come sit down, read the chat, and set a timer for 10 minutes. Huh. It is humid today, and so it is hot under my mask. But before I sit down, I am not sure how well you can see. I'll take a picture with my phone to include in the recap. And oops. I'll add a picture to my stories on Instagram. I'm just at ChemKnits. So this will be up on my stories in a moment. Where? There we go, stories. But the specks are the sharpest on the swish. There are a few specks left on the wool of the Andes and the Big O. But the reason why the colors spread, there we go. Okay, I just posted it to my stories. What was I going to say? The reason why we see a lot of spread on Big O, it is a superwash yarn with nylon. You might expect colors to strike fast, but it is relatively low twist. So it is a little easier for specks and for dye to spread further through something that is low twist than something that has higher twist, like a 4-ply DK weight yarn versus a 2-ply bulky weight yarn. And then of course our wool of the Andes is non-superwash, so even though its twist is fairly similar to the DK, we are seeing speckles there, but the brightness of the color, the color isn't as bright on it because just the colors spread more. Oh, you can see the speckles okay, now that I'm closer. The other thing I was going to say is that you can dye non-superwash yarn to be as vibrant as superwash. Not necessarily in one pan though, that can be a little bit harder. But there are some yarn bases where if you dye at a 1% depth of shade, say Paragon, which is a wool alpaca silk blend, and Swish DK, which is just superwash merino, those will look different. So a 1% depth of shade is 1 gram of dye per 100 grams of fiber. And that can look very different on different bases, not just in terms of if the base color is different, but also just in terms of the fiber content. So to have as bright a color to like your eyes with silk, you need more dye, just because of the way that the molecules take up the dye and also the way they look when wet. I find that silk is extremely translucent when wet. And so the colors will look a lot deeper wet than they do dry, more so than with other colors. Let me see. Okay. You like using plastic forks from McDonald's for speckling? I'm also getting a better appreciation for the neon since Rebecca started making more and more videos with them. I love the neons. I'm thinking about like wanting to dye something for like a rainbow neon sweater. But I have to figure out, I'm going and trying to pick a pattern because I think I want to do a DK weight pattern, but using fingering weight double to help me blend the colors is sort of like the plan in my head. Very Lisa Frank, yes, I am. I was born in the 80s, but my formative years were absolutely in the 90s. The memories. If you wanted to hand paint, so it would be more tonal, would the sprinkles still spread? Not necessarily as far, but there would be, it wouldn't be as extreme as what we see here. This isn't even low immersion. There's a lot of water in the pan. So that's encouraging more spread anyway. But if I was doing this on the countertop, in the end, if we compared these three spaces, we would still see the speckles would be the sharpest on the swish. They would still be speckles on the wool of the Andes, but they would be more spread out. And same with the Big O, just because there's more space for it to go. I do have, I think the same thing kind of goes for like roving
just when you do anything with the dye, it is going to spread further just because there's no twist. So without that twist, that doesn't give, it makes it really easy for things to sort of like wick through. What's the highest percent dye stock that I've made? Dye stock, probably 2%. Depth of shade, I don't know if I've done 8%. It really does depend a bit. Now I'm curious. Okay, so let's see. And let me see. Okay, so here I think I've definitely done 6%, but over here I have, I think I did these depths of shade in both true black and silver gray, and so it's 4%, depth of shade of 4%, and the depth of shade of 0.25% is the palest of each. And in these, I did 2 different dye stocks to show the calculations differently. So for the silver gray, I think I had a 2% dye stock, and the true black, I had a 1% dye stock. And I did that both to show differences with the calculations, but also the concentration of your dye stock is not that important, except if you are going to hand paint directly on yarn. The volume of water that you dissolve your dye into matters more for the technique than the total amount of color. So if I am going to have all the color go on the yarn, and I decide to dissolve 1 gram of dye into 100 milliliters of liquid, or if I dissolve it into like 12 cups of water, the main difference is how far can you spread that dye over the yarn easily. 100 milliliters isn't a lot of volume, and so it would be hard to spread it over a full skein of yarn. But if you have it more dilute, then it's easier to get that color all over the yarn. So that's the main difference for dye stocks. Depth of shade refers to the total number of grams of dye that are on the yarn. So the volume of your dye stock isn't very important. What's important then is, okay, if I have a 2% dye stock, how many milliliters of that dye stock will I use to create the various color? So again, like all of these were dyed with a 2% dye stock. All of these were dyed with a 1% dye stock. It's just true black is much, much, much more saturated, more pigmented than silver gray. And so that's why at a 4% depth of shade, we're only at a charcoal with the gray, but we're at a 4%, it's very much a true black and is fairly pigmented overall. So I hope that that helps. Oh well, the bear versus the white looks so different on Instagram. The bear looks almost yellow. Oh, I didn't even check my color balance on Instagram. Oh yeah, it does look very different. I mean, I think that technically the Big O is a bear color. That's definitely, it looks amplified. It somehow, I don't think that the difference is that extreme. I don't think that it was white Big O though. Let me go turn off the thing. So, okay, wait, I see another question. So, okay, let me, So you mean like this yarn, the Hawthorne hand painted? And I want to, before I talk about this, I think that there's a difference between looking at a larger company and saying, how would I dye something similar, to going to another indie dyer and saying, how would I dye something similar? And in general, I try, even with commercial colorways, I try not to duplicate what someone else has done and copy their colorways. Instead, I try to do my own spin on things. But I'm happy to talk about technique-wise. So, oh, I should not be looking at, I should be looking here. Can I zoom more? No, that's just going to try to make it go to Pinterest. No! It's not what I wanted. Let's see these other pictures. Okay, so they've got their largest speckles. I think that it looks to me like they could have done this, especially with some of the spread that I see, that they could have done this low immersion. So like really, really low volume, but hot. And you can get very little spread. I have a speckling playlist where I talk about a lot of things, and I have created some things similarly. In general, another option would be to, on the countertop, speckle and then steam set. This doesn't look to me like it was mixed with citric acid for like countertop. Usually, I have a recent video where I did some immersion speckling versus countertop and showed the difference in like the spread and the size, and so it really does depend a little bit. But yeah, you could do on the countertop like a fork dipped and get something like a little bit larger, so that would work. But it also really depends on the dye color that you use. I think it's really hard to get speckles with no spread with these fluorescent colors, and I'll show that in just a second. Muse. Okay, wait, a few more questions. So depth of shade is different from dye stock? Yes. So again, I recommend checking out my video, The Math of Yarn Dyeing. This one right here, Die Cut Weekly 117. It is a 2-part video. In part 1, I talk about all the different terms, and then in part 2, I do a demonstration to then show what the differences in the calculations are. So the dye stock is just a concentration. It says I dissolved, a 1% dye stock would be dissolving 1 gram of dye in 100 milliliters of liquid. That's it. It doesn't say any information about dyeing the yarn. Now, if I used 100 milliliters of a 1% stock solution, that would be, I would have 1 gram of dye in what I had measured out. So then I would be adding 1 gram of dye onto the yarn I was dyeing. But the depth of shade would then is based on the weight of the yarn. So if I was using that 1 gram of dye on a kilogram of yarn, it would be a lot different than if I was using that 1 gram of dye on 100 grams of yarn. So that's why there's different values. So the depth of shade is a way to compare one color to itself, like I have in this example right here. Whereas, but as you can see, like this 4% depth of our silver gray to a true black, like a 4% depth of shade of silver gray is not as dark as a 1% depth of shade of the true black. So the depth of shade isn't necessarily helpful for comparing one color to another, except I could say from this, okay, a 4% depth of shade of silver gray is similar to a 0.5% depth of shade of true black. So if I want to make, a really pastel silver gray, I'm going to need to use a tiny, tiny, tiny amount of the black to get there. So that kind of comparison can help, but otherwise, yeah. And let's see, there's a few other questions. Do I prefer citric acid or vinegar? Vinegar, because that's what I started with, and I know approximately how much I need to get the yarn to do what I want. I could switch to, a lot of times I try to use things that are easier for people to get their hands on. I know the steam pan isn't necessarily something people can have, but I love it, so that makes a big difference. But I think it's a lot easier for people to find vinegar, because you can find it easily at a grocery store, than it can be to find citric acid powder in person. So I think, yeah, I could easily recalibrate, I think, and swap to citric acid, but yeah, I mostly just use the citric acid for speckling. Is depth of shade percentage the same with food coloring? So I also have another video. Okay, so Dye Pot Weekly 124 is the Math of Yarn Dyeing Food Coloring Edition. The hard thing with food coloring is that it either comes, usually, in a liquid form already, or it's either already in a liquid, so there's already some concentration that's unknown because we don't know how much of something there's in there, or it is like a gel. So for food coloring, what I did in this video is I think I changed the term a little bit. I think instead of depth of shade, I called it like levels of saturation. So that way there wouldn't be some confusion. But basically, I defined my dye stock as this volume of food coloring gel in this volume of water. That's my stock solution. And so then everything, all the calculations I did was based on that stock solution, which I don't know if I called 1 or something. So I do go through my math in this video. So yeah, I go through like the math and comparing the different colors to each other, and then, no, don't give me that. Okay. Okay, so then, and then I compare the different, like, you know, the different saturations at the end. So it's still a useful comparison. Because I defined my concentration of the stock solution, I could replicate these results. And the rest, I always have, like, in my video description, information about the different concentrations and things that I'm doing. So there is that as well. So that was Dye Pot Weekly 124. Wait, Muse, Stacy. Oh, you wanted Muse hand painted? So the twist on Muse is different. So for these heavy speckles, I didn't go, I think this might be the Muse stock. I do have some videos where I just go really heavy with the citric acid powder low immersion and get similar effects. I have a Leave No Dye Behind that is a little bit recent on Muse that the speckles aren't nearly as heavy as that, but that technique, but doing more and more speckles could bring you in a similar realm there. If it's more about the more variegated ones, that's probably like on a countertop hand paint, or it's probably low immersion is probably the way that like they do it in bulk. Yeah. So with RIT dyes, I would do something similar to the food coloring. I would probably start with like 1 tablespoon of RIT dyes in maybe a cup of water as a stock. and then go from there, because I feel like 1 tablespoon on 100 grams is a lot, but I don't remember. It's been a while since I've used a straight liquid dye on something. It also depends on color. So as I mentioned with black versus gray, some colors are way, way more pigmented than others. And so you might have like, to get a nice fade set, you're like, okay, this is a good range that I need to do. But what you do with like, it's good for a black, might not be good for a crew or something. So I hope that helps, but let's go back to the yarn. And I need my tongs. Up.
And this is why I like zip ties. So we see a lot of spread on all of them, but here's the thing that I wanted to show. Oh, actually, there's not very much spread to the other side on the swish. I guess I really didn't add very much, but the main thing is in some of the areas where we see hints of color, it's pink, not blue. Aha, on the wool of the Andes, we see, and this is even in the middle, ignore the ends because there I intentionally poked things, but you see in the middle that we're seeing more pink spread just because that pink doesn't strike fast. Even on superwash, it doesn't strike fast. And the Big O is a little more similar to our swish. So I'm going to get suited back up and we're going to dye this other side. But I hope that that little digression was helpful. My mask is over here. Yes, please leave other questions. I do 90% of the time read, or maybe 95, maybe I should give myself a little more credit. I usually read comments on all my videos and reply to questions down there. I don't always easily see replies. So if you ask me a question on YouTube and I reply to it, if you then reply to me, I might not see it because I can filter messages that I haven't replied to before, but then that means I don't see on my dashboard things I have replied to, if that makes sense. So I have to be like on the main YouTube page. So this is why it always takes me so much time to use up these fluorescent dyes, is that a little goes a really long way. And I waited 10 minutes before flipping last time. I don't think that is that necessary. And we'll probably at the end, once I run out, we'll probably like dissolve this in water. Okay, but so that's with some little bits of blue. I'm being slightly sparing because I want to make sure I have enough color to add more when I flip, but at the same time, it's okay to go a little heavy because I have a fair amount. The other thing I really, I guess I'll use a tiny bit more frozen right now. The other thing I really like about I like that fluorescent dyes that like a little can go a really long way. But I also really like, I mean, I like the colors in general. They're just really fun to play with. Okay. I don't recommend sticking your hand into hot water. So please use caution, but I know what I can handle, and with my stove I have a fairly good calibration for that. Oh my gosh, it is so sweaty that I'm having so much trouble getting my gloves off. Oh, for super heavy speckles all over, like you can kind of see some heaviness here and in that area. Basically, I think that what I would do is I would speckle really heavily, let it set, and then go in again with another color versus doing it all at once, because that would give some of that like stay, but you definitely want a lot less water than what I have right here. I'll just set the timer for like 5 minutes. I'll heat it up a little bit. And I gotta keep an eye on the time. So if people are curious, a lot of times when I'm filming videos, I will usually be filming a few at a time. And the way that I do that is that like I might have one video on one side of the stove, another on the other, or maybe if I'm doing something immersion, I'll do something else that's steam setting or cool that. And so, excuse me. And I usually time things so that way when I have these periods of waiting, then I'm dyeing something else. And so then I'm like going back and forth between them, which normally is okay. Occasionally I end up losing some footage because like then I take my raw footage and I have a folder for each video. So I separate the raw footage to where it needs to go, but occasionally something ends up in the wrong folder, and then I forget the clip is there, and then I discover it after the video's out, and so that happens. Okay, there's so much to learn. What's my favorite dye? Well, maybe Dharma, but for a really goofy reason. I like their containers better. So Dharma's a little, I like Jacquard a lot too. Dharma's a little bit cheaper, so the cost for 2 ounces of Dharma is only a little more expensive than the cost of ½ an ounce from Jacquard. And I've never ordered a 2 ounce container from Jacquard, so those maybe it's different from the little jars. The little jars, I can't get my fingers in there, and so to speckle. And since I love dealing with dry powders for various techniques, that's just a reason, which is a very superficial reason. As far as the colors go, I really like both Dharma and Jacquard. I reach for the Dharma more because I have more volume of them, but there are certain Jacquard colors that I love in dye stocks and that I reach for that way all the time. So I think that depends a little bit, but I really do like both. You're definitely going to try the speckling method. You've got a tea strainer, but sometimes the powder falls through too fast. Yes, so these are from older live streams, but I had a dusting wand that's intended for powdered sugar, and I put Kool-Aid in it and tried like tapping. And, you know, maybe I tapped it too hard, or I was really close to the yarn, because I don't want to be too high up because you don't want a mess. And so, maybe I tapped too hard, and so it added yarn, the dye heavier. Occasionally with my fingers I mess up, but
I can control how much I pick up and pick up just a small amount, and then really, really just move, like, I mean, this is even exaggerated, like move my fingers the tiniest bit, not even separating them, and then watching how fast the particles are falling out, which is another reason to dilute with citric acid powder if you want to spread things out more. So, you ordered 45 minis. Yeah, I think the labels should be, where did I put them? Okay, there. I think the labels should, they're just paper, so the labels should be fairly easy to remove. But thank you. And again, I'll plug my affiliate link that is pinned up above and is in the video description. And so thank you. It is a win-win because like a win, like it's you're getting something that maybe you want and you're supporting the channel at the same time. So that's the win-win. But of course, I can't see from like my end. I don't see any information about who makes the purchase and things like that. I can tell like what link of mine was clicked on, but I don't know any information. And maybe I can tell. I mean, I can see like an item number of like maybe 3 things that a person purchased, but like I don't get information about who it's going to or any personal information like that. Let me go turn off the timer and then I'll see what these other questions are. Ooh. But yeah, looking at the yarn, there's definitely some speckles on the wool of the Andes, but you can see how much more muted it feels and how much more the color is sort of blown out compared to the superwash yarn on either side. Oh, I thought I was going to sip the water, but I just found that. Excuse me. Do you know if I can use one of those steam pans on an electric range? If it is an induction, where I think it's in an induction range, no, because I think you need special types of pans, and stainless steel doesn't work. Because someone told me, I've never used an induction range, so someone told me that pans have to be magnetic in order to work. And so the pans that I use that I've linked to below aren't magnetic. Magnets won't stick to them. So therefore I don't know is the short answer, or is the long answer. I do have like an electric burner that's like one of the coil ones, and that I've used the steam pan on. Have I? I've certainly used like my other dye pots one. I have an electric one. So I use nitrile gloves are the ones that I use. I don't think I have a latex allergy or anything, but I don't like latex gloves. So the nitrile ones, like using that comes from my lab days, so that's what I still buy. You're planning to dye yarn and then speckle with food coloring, sugar. Should I set I would set the RIT before. And the main reason for setting it before is that if you're going to do a tonal, you usually want more water volume than you do for speckling. And so therefore for speckling, then you can remove most of the liquid but still have that color there if you set the RIT first. So yeah, but all right, I'm going to go back to the yarn. Boop. All back.
I actually feel like I'm being really restrained with the color today. I always end up flipping things what feels like a million times. So I think that the blues definitely strike a lot faster. One thing I will say for sure is that I think that when you have more spread in the color, you then don't need to flip it nearly as much. But I did add a fair amount of acid here first. And we've got a high volume of water as well. I'm going to go put on my respirator again, but I'm just trying to get some color all over, and then I think this time I will probably use up the purple pop and the blue, but then we'll probably still have a bunch of pink, so I'll have to think about that. But actually, at some point, I'll probably move into the like adding color and quickly flipping it without waiting in between. I just think that doing some of the waiting on the live stream is nice, because then you can get a really nice comparison of what the different colors are doing on the different yarn bases. So this time I'm going to start with the purple pop. So another thing I get questions about sometimes is why I go across the yarn like this versus going up and down. And the reason why I personally, and I'm going a little heavier now, the reason why I go across versus up and down is because I'm trying to hit as many strands as possible. And if I just went up and down, that would only hit or sometimes I do an angle so it's not super repeating, but if I just went like down the length, then I would only be hitting some of the colors. But I could sometime just do a whole, actually I think it would be really hard for me to just do a whole colorway only going that one direction, because I'm used to just kind of going all over. It's another reason why I sometimes like to do hearts, because it means that like I switch it up, but I can't really do that with powder that easily. Okay. And so I'm not sure if you can tell, but some of the Big O is out of the water now. And so in that, the colors will definitely strike differently. Now I'm debating. No, I'm going to go for it. Okay, I could probably pick up a little more, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to add liquid to this now. And it's going to be purpley because I'm also rinsing off my glove. Oh, funny, there was also some green, probably because, as I mentioned, I did have a rainbow at one point. But you can see that we do have a reasonable amount of color here. And I'm going to save that. And yeah, it's not that hot. Okay. Well, I guess I want to let this wait. I'll increase the temperature and let it sit for about 5 minutes. And then we will come and probably finish up the purple pop and fluorescent fuchsia, and then add on the dissolved dye. And I'm cleaning things up at a good time because I have a feeling that I should hand Keith some food. So, oh dear, that was not what I wanted to do. So, excuse me, I will be right back. Hello, I'm back, sort of. Can't find where my stream is. Oh, there it is. Okay. I was like, I can't find where I'm managing the stream, and that makes things hard. Okay, let me, oh, I'm going to set a timer. Definite problems of working from home, or having both of us work from home. Okay, let me check the chat. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed my show. Use a pot with a steamer insert. Yes. So I have a blog post. Here we go. Browsing. Here we go, on my website. And I talk about my favorite tools and equipment for dyeing yarn. This post does have both affiliate links and non-affiliate links because if I can link directly to the things that I use, that's what I wanted to do. So my multi-pots that I use for kettle dyeing are these salt stainless steel pots. I have both the 8-quart and the 12-quart. And those come with this pasta insert, which I use a lot with when I'm using mason jars, but I also use that sometimes for steam setting because it is a couple inches off the bottom. And then it does have a steamer insert, so I use that as well. And then safety, and then some of my other like utensils and miscellaneous things that I use. So that is linked in the description of all my videos, at least all of the recent ones. I'm sure that like I have it sort of set up that when I upload a new video that like all these things, that there are certain links that are always there. So there's that. If you do the tonal first, you can be more strategic about where you put your speckles. Whereas if you speckle first, you might cover up some of the best parts. Yes. But if you're doing all over speckles and then more of a semi-solid tonal, sometimes it can be hard to see. If you're doing speckles on top of a medium shade, it can sometimes be hard to see where your speckles are going if the color is already dark, because sometimes things look darker in person or darker when wet. So there can be times where it could be beneficial to do speckles first and then to over dye it with the other color. But that is very much a preference thing. Normally I dye first and then add speckles versus doing the reverse. I did raise the temperature. That's why it's moving a little bit. Can you rinse cellulose and the synthetic fibers in cold water only? Well, so with protein fibers, you want to cool them before you rinse them cold. Ideally, like if the yarn is still a little warm, you can start rinsing with water that is sort of an equivalent temperature, but it's still like the agitation is still a quilting risk. But you can rinse cotton in warm water sometimes. It depends on the dye and what's recommended. We tried purchasing a proofing cabinet and they will not sell to you because it was being delivered to residential and technically not commercially used.
I have not tried to purchase a proofing cabinet, and I think it depends. It probably depends on the customer, or like on the manufacturer. Certainly, I know other dyers that have proofing cabinets and have home-based businesses. So I don't know if the difference is between doing a purchase and giving them like your EIN if you're in the United States and to show that you're a registered business, or if it's an issue because it's a residential address. But it could be worth calling whomever you're trying to purchase from. So I don't know about that. I've never tried purchasing a proofing cabinet, but it's on my like dream list. If we ever move and have space to make a dedicated studio, or we need to have some kind of addition to build. Oh yeah, indie palms. But yeah, see how there's still white, and I'm using the mouse like you can see. At the bottom where we have the Big O, and the top where we have the Swish, there's not necessarily white left, but we still have very pastel areas, whereas the wool of the Andes in the middle is fairly pink all over.
These other two skeins will end up fairly pink all over because the pinks just take forever to absorb. That is a nature of these fluorescent colors. You definitely want to let it cool slowly in the pan to actually there's not a lot of pinks in the water right now. Okay, you're a little bit warm. So I am just moving to where I see the least amount of color. Now, this is 100% wool. This middle skein is feltable, but I am flipping and moving it. And it's okay to do that, but just, you want to be careful. I will be more aggressive. I would be more aggressive with the Stroll and Big O than I would with the wool of the Andes. So just keep that in mind. And my respirator mask is going back on. Now, I suppose that the question is going to be if I should add these liquids at the end on this yarn, which I think I probably will. Give it sort of a base color, or if I want to add the liquids, on some other yarn, but I think I'm torn. I really, really like what this yarn is doing. So maybe I'll save the rest of the dye and just use that in the recap, make the recap for this video a little longer. So one problem I am running into now is that things are a little bit steamy, which is only a problem because it means that these powders are sticking to my fingers a little bit. But okay, I'm going to take, there's still a little bit of powder in both, but I'm going to dissolve this. And to show off, we've got a non-trivial amount of pink and purple left. Wow, there was almost no color on those lids. That's amazing.
So I'm curious to hear what you think. I think I'm inclined actually to do a Leave No Die Behind for this Leave No Die Behind live stream with the leftovers. And dye, because I just like how fun and Barbie those are. Oh. So this is something that is challenging for me sometimes when I do a Leave No Die Behind, because sometimes, like, well, always my goal with Leave No Die Behind is to use up some dye that I have removed from the stock jars in some kind of way, and I don't want to store it and save it. I want to use it up and make something fun. Sometimes the goal is definitely to use it all up, but then sometimes you get a place and you're like, oh, I really, really like this, and then it's like I could keep going, or I could stop, call this done, and leave this where it is. And so that's something that can be hard to decide sometimes. Okay. And if I miss questions, as I'm like sitting back down going through the chat, feel free to ask again when you see my head pop up again. Oh, when I first soak the water, is the temperature cold? Yeah, I usually soak the yarn in cool water, room temperature. I don't use hot water for the soak. Usually, going from cold to hot isn't a problem. It's going the other way that can be problematic. Because when let's see, maybe I'll use my hair. So like, when yarn is cold, it is twisted. Oh. Okay. Okay, so when yarn is cold, it is twisted and ordered. When it heats up, it's not that it untwists, but it sort of relaxes a little bit, and then maybe gets a little disordered. And so then if you twist it back up again really, really quickly, so if you, here's probably not the best example, but it becomes a little more disordered because they relax. And if you shock it and change the temperature really, really fast, you might get felting, which is a real disorder of the fibers. But if you let it slowly come back together, then you can get, then it'll sort of go back into place. Sort of like it's humid, so you like your hair frizzing or something. It's not the best explanation. I thought that my hair might do something a little different than what it did. But I hope that that makes sense, that if you slowly reduce the temperature by letting it cool off before putting it in something cold, then the fibers sort of slowly relax back into their original position. But if you shock it and move it, then they might like kind of shrink back a little too quickly. And then if they do it too quickly, then they are not going to go back in the right spot. Yes, you can get half and quarter size pans. The one I'm using is a full size. You overdye on purpose when you're trying to layer colors. Yeah. Yeah, because sometimes if you do colors one at a time and let them set in between, then you get a more layered look versus them completely blending and spreading as you increase the volume. So that can be handy. So, yeah, I hope that this is fun. But yeah, oh, wait, chat, I need you to vote. Should I use that leftover dye in, I guess, leftover of my leftovers? Or, and dye, excuse me, and dye some other yarn that I haven't shown already? Or should I use it on this yarn? I'm inclined to save it and do like another skein of yarn and just film that. I do have a new camera lens, but I don't think I'm going to break that out just yet. I have a feeling once I swap the camera lens, that's going to be the new lens that I'm using, as long as it doesn't make a lot of noise. I have one lens when the autofocus is so loud that at one point I broke a lens and I had to use it for filming, and it was really hard. Oh, okay, so I see use on this and new skein. If I use it on a new skein, I'll film it. Not right now because wait, I see a yes. New skein? Yeah, I think that's where I'm inclined to go because I think that it would be really pretty on this, but I think it could change the character a lot. And I could see myself getting annoyed. But so I do technically have a purple, a purple, a pink, and a blue. And so I might just I'll probably take a skein of Stroll, and I'll film this, but I might just lightly sort of twist it and arrange it in a pot, like so, and then dye that. Put it on a new skein. Okay, I'll probably do Stroll. I mean, I could do Stroll and Wool of the Andes, but I don't think, there's a reasonable amount of dye, but it's also not that much dye, so I'll do one. Doop, doop. So that's what I will do with the rest. This is already like leave no dye behind to like the 6th. So let's see. I use neon colors for video 1. Then I did the soft blanks that I showed on Instagram. I swear there's another one. Soft blanks. Oh, then I did a non-superwash immersion. So original soft blanks, no, actually, maybe it was original other, then soft blanks, then other, so that's already 4, so this is 5, and then I'll get one more. So this aliquoted dye will be in 6 different videos. Someone commented recently, I had a video where I recreated a neon yarn mop and I showed that, and then I was like, there's leftover dyes. I was like, I'll use this for something. And someone's like, oh, where's the leave no dye behind video for this? And I'm just like, yeah, I think that I used this in like 6 other videos. The fluorescent colors go a long way. I keep feeling like, oh, I'm totally going to use all this up. And then they're just so bright that it's so easy to not go super far. How necessary is it to soak yarn overnight a few hours before dyeing? It's not necessarily necessary. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I said necessarily necessary. I'm going to make myself big. There we go. I think that in terms of pre-soaking, most often I do 20 to 30 minutes. Occasionally, if I do longer, there are a few reasons. If I want to get a semi-solid or go for really even color coverage, you want to do a longer pre-soak because you want the fibers to be really well saturated. Because if there's a dry spot, that's not going to really take up color in the same way. So that's one reason to do really long, especially with silk or cotton or something that takes longer to get super saturated. You want to do a longer scale. But if you're going for something where the color coverage is going to be uneven anyway, sometimes I just quickly dunk it in water, like squeeze it so it soaks up some water, and then go and dye it. So it's just that if it's not well soaked and there is a dry patch, you could have like a white spot on the rest of your yarn. I do have a video on like spot correcting. I like on purpose left a white spot and then showed how like, okay, you can like kind of correct it so to hide it a little bit. So yeah, I mean, I try to, because in my videos, I'm not always 100% sure of what my outcome will be. I try to share how long I soak something for, because that could make a difference in the final results if I did something quickly or a long time. In general, 20 to 30 minutes is totally sufficient, but it depends on the yarn. Like some yarn doesn't absorb water very easily, and so it just takes longer. So yes, glad that makes sense. I am so tired. Oh my gosh, I'm now like leaning on the wall. I didn't bring a pillow or anything to sit on, but I definitely hang out on the floor. My kitchen is like really oddly designed in that like the space between my refrigerator and the island is like if the door is open, no one can walk by. But also it was set up, I think, for like a shallower refrigerator that's in there, which is the one that's there when we moved in. So it's just like, I don't know. And there's like a spot where they have this chandelier in the corner, so it could be like an eat-in kitchen. And like it could be if you put like benches against the wall and made like a little booth, there's space for that. Instead we have a chest freezer. But where the chandelier is, I'm like, if you have a little table there, if you have a chair, no one can pass behind that in the island. So it's just, yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so anyway, I hope that helps. But yeah, anyway, so I sit on the floor because it's a spot where there's enough distance so I can see the computer. The computer is not on the counter where I'm dying. And so, yeah, that's why I sit on the floor during streams. But anyway, I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. The yarn that we are creating is really, really fun. Very pink. I think that some of those blue and purple tones will come through more when I can like control the color balance a little easier with my camera. But I'll definitely, actually, when I go to start this Leave No Die Behind, I will probably just bring my DSLR in where the webcam currently is and film that yarn before going in and dyeing the rest, and then I can show this yarn in the conclusions and show the finished dry yarn. So, yeah, there's that. But thank you all so much for joining me. It was really fun to do an impromptu dyeing live stream. Now that there's more time with the kids at school, I should be able to do this more again, which is really exciting. So please make sure you're subscribed to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel because I do at least one yarn dyeing live stream every month, but I also do a couple unboxings a month and all kinds of other stuff. It's not always a combo, but I figured that like none of the KnitPicks yarn bases in these minis that I was opening up are new to me. They're all ones I've dyed every single one of them in a various video, but just sort of to recap the unboxing at the beginning, KnitPicks now has samples of bare yarn you can purchase for $1.50 each. These are 10-gram mini skeins they have 11 different yarn bases, and I think that the goal of this is really for it to be a sample that you can see, maybe do a test dye before buying a large amount, and for that I think it's fair. I think that some of the bases are really overpriced. In terms like wool of the Andes is I think $5, so paying $1.50 for 10 grams is a huge markup. But on Andean Treasure, which is $14 for 100 grams, $1.50 for 10 grams is reasonable. So I think that the intent is more to be samples versus bulk minis, but I talk about these at the beginning of the stream, so if you just tuned in and you want to hear my thoughts, as soon as like YouTube finishes processing the stream, then that should be back up, and you can go and check that out. Are you going to tell I was sitting on the floor? Awesome. I do unboxings on the floor too because it's just an easy, well, sometimes I do it in a chair. It's just like, I don't know, easy for me, especially if they're big, then it's easy for me to deal with everything. So, but yeah, so I think it's great that KnitPicks has those samples. I have been checking and will continue to check to see if they will also offer bulk minis for purchase. I've been checking the like bulk bare yarn page and stuff, but given that all of the minis, given that there's a price range of $5 to $14 of the bare yarn, and all of the minis have the exact same price, I think that the intent is really for them to be samples. Of course, you can buy multiple, but it's not something that's really set up for someone who buys hundreds of minis at a time for various projects. So I can't imagine having to detag thousands of minis. Because yeah, how many? I dye a lot. Like thinking ahead to Hanukkah, I go through many 25 packs. So yeah, but I'm not sure exactly when the recap will be done. I think it depends on my overall filming schedule for the week, but hopefully not too long, and my editing schedule, because I'm now making a tiny bit more editing for myself. Ooh, I just had a thought. I was like, ooh, I could swap this for whatever. I think Friday's video is going to be a Leave No Dye Behind. So I'm like, I could swap this for that and save that one for later. But no, I probably won't do that. I'll let it be a bonus. Oh, it's my pleasure to answer questions. I mean, my whole mission statement is to make yarn dyeing feel less intimidating and approachable. And so, or at the very least, so that way people can appreciate the effort that indie dyers go to for creating their yarn and then saying like, wow, it's absolutely worth it. And I'm not just talking about me. I do have a Etsy shop, but you know, I can dye, it's a big day for me if I dye 15 skeins. The people who dye hundreds of skeins a day, like the work and just even the washing of the pans and like all the work for all of that, it's a lot, and it's a labor of love, and people who do it because they love it and they love yarn and color. And so I could probably go without buying any more yarn for the rest of my life, but I will still support other indie dyers because their work is beautiful. So there is that. But yes, it is just a lot of fun in general. So if you want to find me on social media, all of the places you can find me, I'm on Instagram and Facebook and, well, YouTube, obviously. Oh, and I have an Etsy shop, I have a Patreon, all those places where you can find me, tons of links in the video description. Seriously, it's worth checking out if you want to learn more about anything I'm using or learn more about how you can support the channel and things like that. You wish cotton was as easy to dye as protein fibers? Yes, that would be amazing. It would be wonderful. I do have a whole playlist on dyeing cotton yarn. And I have another cotton video coming out soon. Is that tomorrow's? I don't remember. Sometimes it's hard to remember from like what I've just edited and then when things are coming out. So I don't remember what tomorrow's video is. It might be a cotton dyeing video though. So there's certainly one coming up soon. If it's not tomorrow's, then it's soon. But I think it's tomorrow's actually. Today's Monday. I'm very disoriented. And also like when your job is you're sitting in a room by yourself talking to yourself, sometimes it's really easy to lose track of the day of the week. Sorry. I'm losing it. I am very sorry. I can't stop laughing. I can stop laughing. Oh, thank you so much, Stacy. I mean, I tried because, like, the other thing that I'll say is that each individual indie dyer can only dye so much yarn. You know, even indie dye companies that are small teams, they also can only dye so much yarn. And at some point, the demand, you know, there are so many indie dyers that, like, there is space for more indie dyers in the community. And so I think that, you know, I think dyers supporting dyers is very important versus being competitive. And so, you know, it's, yeah, I think that because I know some people watching are like, oh, this is fun, maybe I want to set up a shop. I think that it's important to think like, okay, what about your perspective is unique? Because like it is a very flooded market, but there's always like there's always space for other people. So yeah, just don't like, I wouldn't quit your job at first. You should see if like how much you like it and stuff. So. But there's that. But anyway, I am going to go and start filming this Leave No Dead Behind, Leave No Dead Behind, Leave No Dead Behind. That's what I'm going to do, and then have some lunch, and then I guess then I have to already get the kids. But anyway, I hope that you're having a really, really wonderful day, and thank you again for watching, and yeah, I know I already said subscribe, but if you turn notifications on, when I do a last minute live stream, then you can get a push notification depending on your settings on the app on your phone, so you can get a push notification so that way you don't miss a live stream. But you can also have the settings set so you don't get push notifications, so you can also do that. But that little bell will turn on notifications for ChemKnits tutorials. So anyway, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and I will chat with you all soon.